Governance Bites. I'm Mark Banicevich, and I get to spend once more some time with my friend Philip Whitmore. Philip, great to see you again, mate.
Good to see you again, Mark. Excellent.
Philip is one of New Zealand's leading authorities on cybersecurity. He's a partner at KPMG, specialising in that area. He's also a member of the Chartered Accountants Association of Australia and New Zealand, although he doesn't like to say he's an accountant because it's not a very sexy thing. It's not a sexy cybersecurity.
Accountants are cool, but
not as cool as cyber.
IT people don't think accountants know anything about IT, so I don't tell clients often
of course.
that they have a perception that accountants do this with numbers,
yes,
and just that.
Yeah,
so very rarely do the two worlds collide.
Well, you've been in risk for a long time, right? Around internal audit and that sort of stuff. And cybersecurity was just a natural.
It's just another form of risk, really. It is, it's just a different way of managing risk. It isn't all hackers and dark rooms and things like that. It is risk management. There's no way to stop it and be 100% safe. It's about managing your risk with your limited resources. We've all got limited time, limited money, so where do we focus our efforts?
Yeah, and you've got to accept some level of risk in business. The business is about taking risk, right? And it's about taking smart risks and minimising the risk in areas that aren't so smart.
Exactly, and if we manage our risk well, then we can do exciting, dynamic things with our business. So I use the analogy, why do we have brakes on cars? An analogy for cybersecurity, why do we have brakes on cars? Your traditionalist would have said to stop the car, and that's not right. We have brakes on cars so we can go fast. And the same thing with cybersecurity or risk management as a whole. If we manage things well, we can go fast, do exciting, dynamic things, whatever our business objectives are. If we don't got cybersecurity right, it's going to trip us over and stop us doing it. We're going to spend all our time focusing in the wrong direction as opposed to trying to achieve what we want to achieve.
Right. Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that. So last time when we caught up with Philip, we talked about cybersecurity and director responsibility. We're going to broaden that this time and talk about data. Well, actually, no, we're going to focus a little bit more. Talk about data security and integrity and director responsibility. So kind of a subset of this. We rely as companies now on data. Well, in fact, we always have really relied on the data about our clients and so forth. The major risk that we have now is that we also rely on digital connectivity. Every business is connected somehow to the internet, and so you have this risk of losing access to those data, whether it's somebody hacking in or email accidentally sending information out to the wrong place. All these sorts of things happen. We're all using cloud services. We've got interactive websites. We store this huge plethora of client information. What risks do third-party IT providers pose to their customers, those providers we all rely on?
I think third-party organisations probably present our greatest risk. And here we're talking about two sets of organisations really. Those that we let into our environments to help support our environments, to supplement our IT team, or they might be our IT team entirely, or say cloud providers where we give them our information and that they're protecting on our behalves. And sometimes we have aspects of control and they have other aspects of control. So two lots. We, however, just tend to be, someone else looking after that, therefore it's okay. And that's often not the case, or they've got one set of expectations, you've got another. Most of the high-profile security breaches we've seen in New Zealand, Australia, or elsewhere in recent times have been down to a third party being breached.
Yes.
So if I want to get into your systems, your front door is probably quite secure and robust. So attacking that, not the greatest method. But if the IT provider you use is a soft underbelly, I'll hack into them and then use the connectivity or the access they've got through to you. So we saw, if I go back just over a year ago down in Wellington, we had an IT support provider there that got hacked into, and then from there impacted the IT systems and data of all their customers. And that was made public. It hit the likes of Accuro, an insurance provider. It hit some government agencies like the Ministry of Justice and a range of other ones, all public. And that's not the first one. It happens over and over again because we just assume these organisations are good. Same with cloud providers. There are some, and I'm not saying they're all bad. There are good and bad cloud providers. Some really good ones, put a lot of effort, a lot of focus. And sometimes using cloud providers will end up far more secure than what we could do ourselves. But other times far less secure. Not everything's the same.
And they're a bigger target too, because as you say, that example that you gave, and Accuro I think is now up for sale. They're looking to be sold to Unimed. and I'm sure that a huge part of that is off the impact of that data breach, because it has a huge impact for businesses. The providers, as you suggested there, have access to so many more clients. If you target a company, as you say, the doors are fairly closed, largely because they don't do so much of it themselves. The outsourced provider's doing it. You go to the outsourced provider, you're getting 100 different companies, not one company.
It's a multiplier. We normally use an organisation use a term like a multiplier. It's normally in a positive way. Yes. I guess it is for the bad guys this time. It happens often, and often the IT provider and then ourselves wouldn't know it happened. Sometimes it's very public.
Right.
Sometimes I'm stealing information, holding it to ransom or applying ransomware. That's very public because I want to embarrass you, I want to get money, or want you to be able wanting to use your IT system. Other times I'm in and I'm out, and I come back later and I do it all over again. Third party, probably some of the biggest risk. It's the one that we're just forgotten about. It's altogether.
Absolutely, and it really falls down to the company when they're choosing those outsourced providers, doing some very solid due diligence, doesn't it? And asking the right questions of that provider around data security, which means having some knowledge of what questions to ask and how to interrogate the answers.
Correct. I mean, there is a process we have in place again. It is a business process about assessing risk of these third parties, and someone someone is gathering information to help inform our judgment about that level of risk and have an outcome. And if you want an example, we can go get a question set itself. Government has one for around cloud providers that uses that's freely available on, I think, digital.gov.nz that you could use. Used to be called the GCDO or GCIO 105, Government Chief Digital Officer, 105 questions, or Government Chief Information Officer before that, 105 questions. It's evolved, there's a new version of that, but that's a good base set of questions to ask yourselves as part of it, and ask a cloud provider. Different a cloud provider, others not different. Albeit those questions might differ. If I look at an organisation, you might have hundreds and hundreds of different providers. Or
Yes.
not uncommon to have multiple hundreds of cloud systems you use or third-party systems you use. So you might stratify them based upon inherent risk. I don't care about that system at all because if anything happened, I'm not going to lose anything. It's low impact. This one I really care because it's our core system to our business.
It's got all the client information on it.
Or I don't care about the person that comes in and picks up dry cleaning because they've got access to IT systems, but I care about this third party because they've got access to everything. Mm-hmm. So often it's about stratifying them out based upon inherent risk and then different approaches to different organisations to make it workable.
Right, okay. So what role do directors play in keeping entities safe from this kind of digital disruption?
Look, I think it is asking the questions about, do we have a third-party security risk management processes in place? Can you show us what that risk profile looks now? It's probably not much more than that, but those questions in itself will be interesting. I think the first one, do we have a process? Oh, yes, and it's good and bad. But show us what that risk profile looks like, and it should be in a way that we can all understand, because again, it's just another risk, would be an interesting outcome. Albeit, I think often you'd say, have you got a third-party risk management process in place? People go, well, yeah, kind of, a little bit, or sometimes we do things. And often, that might just be at an initial stage when we onboard someone, we might ask them some questions and have a bit of a judgment about it. And some people do that initial process really well. But it's about the whole life cycle. You might be a provider to us for many years. That doesn't mean that your risk that you present to us is the same for many years. So how do I track it on a regular basis? How can I do it sometimes in real time? There are things that give a view of risk of real time as well.
So the starting point could be, as you suggest, to the 105 questions that you've identified would be a great place to start. Understanding where the cyber risks are inside your own business, identifying that one of them is all of your third-party providers, getting a list of all of the third-party providers you're dealing with, and then select, identifying them individually by risk level, what information is stored there, and who has access to it, and where are the ways that it can get broken, and dealing with it that way. And as a director, you'd want to be making sure that those sorts of activities are happening inside the business. Yep, correct. Look, if organisations were actually asking these questions, that in itself would lead us to a better outcome in New Zealand. So if I'm sitting in the US, every third-party provider, a data centre provider, any sort of IT provider,
will go get an independent assurance report, very much like a financial audit report, in fact very, very similar, about my control environment, my IT control environment. Now in America that would normally be called a SOC 2 report or a SOC 3 report. That's an American term, but there's a very, you've got a SOC report, that is a very generic term that you could use, or the actual standard that's used in New Zealand and most countries other than America and Canada is ISAE 3402. So it's an international standard about reporting on the control environments. So, if I was a provider and I had someone knocking on my door every day asking a question, or 100 questions, or whatever it may be, I would be better off to run off and get an independent report to answer those. Now, that's probably a good question to start with. Do you have a SOC report? If the answer is no, it's like, that would raise a little bit of concern initially, because, organisations that take it seriously generally will have something, albeit in New Zealand, not many do yet. There is a small number, because their customers, particularly their customers that are coming in from offshore, are asking those questions, and we need to ask them more.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and this again comes down to that concept of due diligence, right? Doing your due diligence on those companies. Moving into the Privacy Act, it requires anyone who holds client data to keep it secure. We now have a Privacy Act that requires companies to notify the Privacy Commission every time there's a privacy breach. What issues does this raise for directors around client data?
Look, it is a challenge. So it's again, not just client data, it's any private information, including our staff. I think the biggest challenge to organisations, compliance with it. So Privacy Act isn't something that's seen as sexy, so often we actually don't talk about it. We talk about security. Security and privacy are very interlinked, but they're not the same. Albeit in New Zealand, certainly most privacy breaches are resulted of a security breach. Someone gets in where they shouldn't be and takes out private information. We don't tend to misuse information, for example. But we should be asking similar questions. What is our compliance against the Privacy Act? I guess it's measurable. That there is a compliance against it. And it's interesting. And that part of the challenge at the moment is organisations aren't focusing on it because there is no real fines and penalties. There is a fine for not disclosing a breach that could do serious harm to the individuals. Mm-hmm. Now that what serious harm may be is up for challenge and debate. But there's a fine for that, and it's $10,000. In Australia, I've said in the past, Australia changed essentially their Privacy Act on the basis of your Optus and Medibank and a whole range of big breaches that affected most Australians. The fines and penalties there for having a breach, not reporting it, but actually having a breach, is $50 million. And we're starting to see that evolve in New Zealand, or start to play out in New Zealand. So what we see next month is RBNZ's expectations about, if you're a regulated entity from them, about expectations about how quickly you report things to them. And we're starting to see, FMA has got some guidelines as well around expectations around being licensed. So they're playing out. What's going to come though is even more above that. So they're the gentle touch. Mm-hmm. We're going to start to see legislation around critical infrastructure providers. And that's not just water and power, it is education, it is food, it is everything we do as New Zealand organisations. There is regulation coming because we don't do it well.
That's a really good point. I encourage businesses, when I talk to businesses, to turn the whole thing on its head and say, this is actually just about good business practice.
It is.
We're talking here to a large extent about risk, an element of risk in this case. And I'll say that when things are going well, businesses tick along, things are great. And businesses don't tend to fail when things are going well. They tend to fail when something goes wrong. And these things, the likelihood of this stuff going wrong now is so high. We talked about cybersecurity last time, these issues around client data, because of the involvement of third parties in storing data, the use of cloud services rather than having control on our own servers and things these days, the risks are so much greater of having breaches in this space. And as a director of a company, it behoves you to ensure that the company is to succeed. It has to be over its major risks and ensure that the company has good ways of dealing with those risks to mitigate them and minimize them and if they do go wrong, to react to them quickly, to respond quickly and recover quickly.
Yeah, it is always about risk management. And I think people get there, but often you'll see an enterprise risk register whether it's a privacy risk or a security risk or both, it's 1 or 2 line items. That's all very good. And look, that is probably the volume we have for what's underlying that. Yes. Where is our security risk management process that rolls up to give me that 1 or 2 line items? Okay, and privacy can be part of that as well. Most organisations, that doesn't exist. It comes down to someone going like that. There isn't, certainly in New Zealand that we're talking about here, there isn't that size behind it. I don't know why. Many parts of our business are very focused on risk. I think it just comes down to IT people. It's not something they know, and again, it's a lost in translation. We don't know what questions to ask IT people. IT people don't know how to measure the risk, apart from very general terms. I'm not saying they're not doing it, but it's not the same way we manage other risks. In our organisations, it is something we put aside. It's even interesting from, say, banking sector. We very focused on risk. Bank. You have a whole op risk teams, but it doesn't tend to be cybersecurity risk. That's put somewhere else.
Yes.
It's not part of op risk, but it is an operational risk.
Yes.
And it's a key operational risk. So it's even interesting for organisations like banks who do risk management very, very well and very focused on it.
And in other industries as well, the sports organisation that I've been involved with, you talk about risk management and that, and they think health and safety risk. And as a board, you need to think broadly about all types of risk and put them all, prioritise them according to their likelihood and their impact and so forth. And then from that, the ones that are most extreme are the ones that you really have to ensure that you're all over. And those ones that often come to the front of mind in many of those organisations might be in that higher area, but in focusing singularly on a risk, they're forgetting everything else.
Yeah, it is multiple risks. You're right, health and safety in many businesses will be towards the top, if not the top. It depends upon the nature of the business. Cybersecurity for most businesses will be at the top, top
should be at the top.
3 or 4.
Yes. And there are many businesses where health and safety is right near the bottom.
Yeah.
You've already provided the example of the firm in Wellington that the data provider that collapsed and affected companies like Curo and some of the government entities and so forth. And I suggested, the Curo is now being bought by Unimed, that these things had significant impacts on those businesses. What lessons should directors take from these examples?
I think it's asked questions now about how do we manage third-party risk. It sounds quite simple, but just having that conversation itself will start to worry you. The management should be able to articulate that way. And third-party security risk is probably the main third-party risk to talk about, but other ones as well. Asking questions about third-party security risk, just having that conversation will be enlightening in itself. You'll start to get lots of comfort, or probably the opposite, lots of discomfort straight away.
And then it'll be time to dig deeper and make sure that things happen.
Correct. Yeah. You can outsource responsibility for doing something, but not accountability. We tend to, though, think the accountability for it is being outsourced.
Yes.
Yeah. We're not. If we ask the question, no. But in reality,
it's very easy to say that company does that, therefore it's their problem. Yeah. But ultimately, if anything goes wrong, it's your company that's going to be impacted. It is, as you say, you haven't transferred responsibility.
No, and you get all sorts of interesting arguments at times. That's what they do. They're really good at it. Well, they might be, or they might not be. How do you know? Just because they're a big name, big organisation, global, national, doesn't mean they're good at it, but they could be. Just because they're a small organisation doesn't mean they're bad at it either or good at it. They could be either. Or they might do things really well in one area and not well, or they might take a one-size-fits-all approach, but each organisation is different. Or they're managing this part of the risk really well, but the other part of the risk is your responsibility, and you had assumed it was theirs. Yeah.
Right, and it comes down to those due diligence questions we talked about before. Yeah, absolutely. That's been great. Thank you again,
Excellent.
Philip.
Thank you.
One final question for you. What's the best advice you'd give to a new director?
Ask lots of questions. I think it's ask lots of questions, and if you don't get answers in a way that you understand, ask more questions or different questions. We don't do that enough. We directors will consume information, I think, in the IT world often, but not necessarily ask. Directors are getting a lot better. It is a challenging topic, I understand that. It is ask lots.
Awesome, that's great advice, thank you, and don't be afraid to ask the stupid questions.
Oh, exactly.
Don't pretend to be an expert on anything. Get some advice, as you said last time. and yeah, just keep digging, ask the questions, particularly in this world of, we talked today about things that you're outsourcing to third parties largely. Some of the stuff may be done in-house. A lot of companies outsource most of it now, but just make sure that the risks are considered, that you know what they are, and you're doing the right things to resolve them. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Philip. I really appreciate your time. It's been great to catch up again.
Cheers, thanks, Mark.
Look forward to catching up with you soon.
All right, great.
See you next episode.